come in, I thought it might be interesting to share with you some ideas of what it was like to be a kid growing up in World War II. First of all, we had air raid drills. Like the schools have earthquake and fire drills, we had air raid drills. And this is because there had been some bombing that happened in Oregon, and they were afraid it would happen in this more populous area. And so they had drills. And what happened during the drills was there would be a siren warning you that that's what was going to happen. And then all the electricity went off in town. My dad did not want his family to be sitting in the dark during these drills, so he fitted plywood to the windows in a particular room and made sure that it was very tight, and then he put heavy drapes on top of that, and then he would go outside and he'd look carefully to make sure that no light was escaping. The furnace was controlled by electricity in our house, which meant that if it was on when the drill started, you had no adjustment of it, and so if it was too hot, you had to open a window. If it was too cold, you piled on blankets. We had what were called victory gardens. You ever heard of a victory garden? Yep. It was a vegetable garden, and you could pretty much put a victory garden wherever you could find soil. So there was a vacant lot next door to my grandparents' house, and I don't know if they asked permission, but they went ahead and planted a garden there. It was soil that had never been turned over in no time, and so there was another larger vacant lot across the street, and a man came there periodically with his team of horses pulling a plow, and they talked him into coming over to our vacant lot and plowing it for us. My grandfather took care of most of that because he lived next door. My dad had helped him plant it, but my dad was a traveling salesman for an insurance company, so he was out of town most of the time. My grandfather got to take care of the garden. But this also leads into the next subject. There was rationing. And there were various things that were rationed, and a point was that gasoline was. And if you had a job that required more driving, you got a larger amount of gasoline to drive, and if you were just around town, as my mother was, then you got less. So they had different amounts of gasoline that the two of them could have. They had rationing for leather shoes. This was a hardship for a number of people. For a child with growing feet, I had to have new shoes periodically. So we were allotted points over a period of time. This is as I recall. But at any rate, one time my grandfather took me down to the shoe store and bought me what would fit my feet, not because it was something that I liked. I had no choice. They were very mannish, black Oxfords. Kids today wouldn't be seen dead in them, but at any rate. And I was walking along one time, not paying any particular attention as kids do, and I kicked a bottle. I didn't realize it was a broken bottle. It made a large hole in the toe of my shoe, and I had to wear that pair of shoes with that hole in the toe for a very long time. I learned something, however. There were foods that were rationed also, and I don't remember what they were. Probably sugar was one of them, but I just know it happened. And we had no TV. We had radios, and the radios at that time did pretty much what the TV does today. There's news, there are dramas, there are mysteries, comedies. It was just all audio. And one of the shows that my parents liked to listen to was Gabriel Peter with the 6 o'clock news. And he started his programs with either, "There's good news tonight," or "There's bad news tonight," depending upon how things were going with the war. Another program that we enjoyed very much was Bob Hope. Bob Hope, from time to time, would rebroadcast the programs that he was sharing with the troops overseas. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to our speaker, Barbara Brown. Most of you know her, but Barbara and I have known each other a very long time. Yes. And we read together, and we've had all kinds of adventures together. At any rate, you're on.
Thank you, dear. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I have an opportunity to introduce to you this morning my church buddy. A lot of you have met her, but let me ask my darling sister, Laurie Boyd from Menlo Park, to stand up and say hi to her. Welcome her to our church. Well, it's a few years ago. Victory in Europe, better known as VE Day, wildly celebrated in the Northern Hemisphere. When the fighting stopped in the Second World War, this was May 25th, 1945, a few months before the fighting stopped in Europe. And the military faced thousands of American soldiers over there. And they actually, when the fighting stopped, were out of a job, you might say. So the military looked at this, what are we going to do with these people? We need to turn these troops into occupation troops overnight. And they faced many problems, but they did. Then they asked, what will we do with our men, our war-weary fighting men, besides just patrolling maybe the streets of Germany? And they thought of a lot of things. That there was things where the GIs could sign up for something. And then I think a remnant of the Beard School of Languages that they could do, things like that. And someone said, well, what about entertainment? They expected some USO shows to go over, but they knew that whoever thought this up, we probably have dozens and thousands of guys who have a lot of good talent in the ranks. And so they did. So they accepted the idea, and they called it the Soldier Show Program. Hundreds of GIs signed up. Mickey Rooney was in our first show. And Art Penn, who was later a director in Hollywood, was there. There were a lot of notables. So the Soldier Show was born. Well, what about women now? They said we will headquarter here and use the GIs in the cast. A director and two New York actresses, Peggy Wood was one, agreed to canvass the United States major drama schools and hire the women to go over there. So that was very successful. There were schools like Pasadena Playhouse right here on the West Coast. This is where my story really starts. After high school, my dad agreed that I could attend the Chicago Art Institute Goodman School of Drama in Chicago, right on Michigan Avenue. And I did. And it was a very in-depth training of theater arts. It included not only acting, but stage management, directing, and a lot of other things. Very good background. And after I left this place in 2 years, I had promised my dad I would get some book learning at Northwestern University, which was in Evanston, and it was my hometown, not far from my house. So I entered there in '44 as a freshman, really, in the drama major. It was a wonderful addition to my previous experience. Well, one day, I think it was in early summer of '45, I got a call from the registrar of the Goodman Theater. Now, I hadn't thought of her or talked to her in over a year. And she said, Barbara, can you get down here in an hour? I got something that would interest you. Now, please, right away, I can't hold these people much longer. I didn't even know what it was. I got on the L, went to Chicago, walked into the Goodman Theater, black, with two little figures in the middle with flashlights. And she got a hold of me and said, get up there, sing, dance, do anything. Okay. Well, I was ready. I was a Pi Phi at Northwestern, and we had a sister, a sorority sister, who was very clever at writing lyrics. And she wrote a cute patter song about what the Americans had to give up for the war effort. And I only remember the first line. I gave my nylon stockings to the Air Corps. Da-da, Lucky Strike ring, da-da-da-da. And it went all through. It was a really cute song, and it was very appropriate for what I was auditioning for. I did a couple other little ditties I was trying out for radio in Chicago, and I had some voices that I could work out. Well, when I came down, they hired me on the spot. And to do what? It was to sign a one-year contract to join the GIs in producing theater shows in Germany. 6 months later, I was standing in a staging area outside of New York City in my bright civilian army uniform with 10 or 12 other women out for the same purpose, about to board a ship for Germany, a troop ship, filled with replacement soldiers. And as I remember when that ship pulled away from the Statue of Liberty, I kind of went, a year, but it didn't last long. The gals we went with, we found 4 or 5 of the women who were on the ship doing my kind of work. And we really bonded and made a team, and we had a lot of talent there. And we hoped we could stay together in Germany and do shows together, because we were dreaming up all kinds of things we could do. And it turned out that we did. Well, in those ports, we landed in the Bremen port city, the port city of Bremen, and took a train to Paris, of all places, where in the middle of the night, I was sitting in the Gare du Nord on the top of luggage, didn't know where I was going, what we were going to do, and we sent one of our team off to find out where we to go. You know, the communication was real sketchy in those days. You could have been a celebrity and nobody would know what to do with you. It was really a little bit challenging. And one of our team leaders was called Sylvia, and she was to be called later on Fearless Leader, and she proved that. She was very instrumental in expediting things and finding out where we to go. We went to Paris for 3 days, which with the Soldier Show program's temporary headquarters, and in 3 days moved to a town in Germany, Regensburg, right outside of Munich, where the actual permanent headquarters of the program is to begin. I have a remembrance of this. They took all of the civilian actors, technicians, that I say that was our title, pretty fancy, and called us together one day. There might have been 20 of them. And they said, everybody who wants drama on this side, and everybody who wants musicals on this side. Well, being a drama girl, I started for the drama. Now Sylvia, our glorious leader, she and I became very good friends. She was a wonderful gal, about 10 years older than me, rather worldly wise, knew everything. She said, Barb, come here, quick. You're the girl back home, get it? You're the pretty little blonde that they want to see on the stage, and every GI relates musicals. Well, I was glad that I did. I was glad that I did. But you know, what did Lord help up a drama student? So began a year of 2 separate productions. We did a run on a review at first, and found there were a lot of problems in the way of our getting our job done. But our second musical, our second show was a musical. It was our pièce de résistance. And it was because of the venue we were given to build it in. And can you imagine? We had given to us, with full authority, the beautiful Munich Opera House. I've been there for decades. Finest voices in the world sung on those stages and so on. It was impressive, wasn't it? I wanted to do a gendarme lineup in the second act of this musical. Kind of a Maurice Chevalier, it was cool, you know, very sophisticated. And I sent out a casting call for it, and one day 10 GIs came in, 10 or 12. Combat boots, uniforms, not shaven, said, "Hi Barb, here we are." And I went, oh boy. But 6 weeks later, you'd be amazed. You'd just be amazed. And we had absolute free limit of what we could do in this opera house. We built the show there. We used their shop for our scenery. Beautiful scenery, professionally done. And also costuming. So all you had to do was say, "Open your costume department, please." And they did. I have never seen such glorious costuming. Not costuming, but authentic. Think of the operas, Aida, Wagnerian, all of them. There were costumes galore. I was so impressed. And then I thought, well, I wonder if I dare ask a German if they have gendarme costumes, Parisian gendarme. Aha. And there was a lineup of about 40 of them. Beautiful, little capes lined in red satin, those little gold pillbox hats, and beautiful, beautiful suits. And I could just say, I'll have this, and this, okay? And all the cast was costumed from that glorious costume department. And we had loads of musicians, beautiful musicians, very talented musicians, singers and, vocalists, and we also had instrumentals. So we had an excellent band, maybe 15, excuse me. Okay, that was our, and the show, let's see, we wrote it, it was a French farce at the turn of the century, where a father and son came to Paris to see the sights, and all the mischief making they could get into gave us poetic license to open up little skits and special songs that the GIs would like. It was really a beautiful sight, very sumptuous and very good looking play, musical. One of the songs the GIs liked that we stuck right in the middle of this Parisian musical was popular during the war, and it was called Which of the Great 48? 48 states in those days. And I remember just the first line of that one. Which of the great 48 do you hail from? Are you from Louisiana or maybe Alabama? And the boys would go wild when their state was mentioned. So we kind of worked that in amongst little funny details. And we took poetic license to do anything we wanted. And Sylvia, our glorious, fearless leader, said that she really knew how to entertain a war-weary soldier. And so she was very good advice on how we wouldn't make it too sophisticated, and we would make it geared to soldier entertainment. And it made it very popular. Okay, let me find my notes. I have to follow it pretty carefully. We traveled in a caravan in those days, a semi with all our costumes and sets in the front, and 5 ambulances following it. Those were the people carriers in those days. And we had Oui Madame, soldier show splashed across our semi. There were many difficulties when we traveled, we found, logistic-wise and otherwise. We would get into a town, for instance. They had in every town in Germany, we started in Munich, went up Frankfurt, Stuttgart, Darmstadt, Mannheim, Nuremberg, all the way up to Bremen. And we would arrive in a town with this huge caravan, around 5 o'clock, been on the road all day. And they had in each town a kind of an American headquarters with a light. And we would find it. And this is what might happen. We would go in, and there'd be a lieutenant sitting there, and he'd say, I have no such notice of you being here at all. Well, here comes fearless Sylvia, our fearless leader. Leave it to me, dear. She would walk in, and this is the way she told it. She would say to the lieutenant, Lieutenant, who's your commanding officer? And he might say something like, Captain Anderson. Where would he be right now, do you think? Well, maybe at the officers' club, take me there. And he did. She would find, as being civilians, we didn't have to salute or observe rank. She would say, where is it? I want to see Captain Anderson, please. She'd sit him down and say, Captain, we're in an emergency, and here's what we need, blah, 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 blah. This is for your soldiers, the morale building. I want you to help us immediately. And she'd come back and say, it's all set, guys. You know, now this, believe it or not, happened more than once. This woman could face anything and get it taken care of. So the conditions for traveling began to improve for all the soldier shows. They were the benefits of her. Because we became kind of famous, the Oui Madame company, they can do anything. We got some special privileges over there that the other shows didn't get. And let me share a couple. This is a beauty. We were stationed somewhere in Munich, and it was New Year's Eve day. And Sylvia comes breezing in the afternoon and says, pack your formals, girls. We're going to have New Year's in Hitler's eagle's nest. So we were asked to take a formal. I couldn't imagine why. We packed our formals back, and the car will be good to pick you up in an hour. And up we went up that Bavarian Alp to that famous place. And it was taken over, requisitioned by the American military, of course, all the high-ranking officers, and they found that there were American women in town, and we were their guests for the weekend. Well, we were dancing around and having fun, and I was probably with a colonel 3 times my age. Yes, sir. Well, it wasn't a 22-year-old's preference, but I did my job. Where was our glorious, fearless leader? Patton had passed on recently, and General Thurman was his successor, and he was at this event. Sylvia said, over here, General, and General, I want to talk to you about soldier shows. This is what we need, that's what we need. And here she was over there, puffing away on her cigarette, and we were dancing around. She laid out plans for the future of the soldier show program to the General, which he carried out. Things began to happen, more and more. It got easier and easier. We had a lovely time up there. I learned that that Eagle's Nest was originally a tribute to Hitler's 50th birthday. But it was called a tea house, I think. And also that the whole Third Reich was planned on that very veranda I was standing on. Remember the picture of Hitler and his German shepherds and his officers around him? They were in the newspapers a lot. And here I was standing in that very spot. Amazing, wasn't it? Yeah. We got a trip up the Zugspitze Mountain, clear to the top. Could see Austria as far. It was very exciting. Scared me to death because when you went out of the little house, there was a rail and nothing else. You could have slid down that thing to your... but it was an interesting and exciting trip for us all. And I remember I had the most wonderful German potato soup I'd ever eaten. We were given a tour through the Dachau concentration camp. It was a very sobering event, difficult. Nothing, the prisoners were all gone, but nothing had been done to it. It was very raw. It had indications of the tortures that the prisoners received. And I remember a room where the imprints of the dead bodies went up to the ceiling. Very, very serious stuff. And in the front of Dachau was a cage. And in this cage was a German officer in his uniform and reading a book. His name was Otto something. They maybe had been keeping him there until the trials. We stared at him like an animal. A very interesting thing to see because in along those lines, we received tickets to the Nuremberg crime trials. It was a very interesting day we spent, and we didn't understand much because most of it was in German. But the German and the doc were all Hitler's men. Otto was one of them. Himmler, I don't think Goebbels was. He was the one that committed suicide in that bunker, wasn't he, with Hitler? But all of the others, and they had this most awesome, the cruelest faces I've ever seen. Never looked up, never made a smile, never changed expression, and sometimes they wouldn't even answer when a lawyer asked him a question. It was awesome. But that was an interesting one. And one more. I got a tour. We were all given a vacation during the year, and I took one with some girls to Denmark. And it was very nice. It was a nice break for us all. We had fresh milk and eggs. Oh, they tasted so good. And I remember the Tivoli Gardens, and I remember the Elsinore Castle, Hamlet's fame. So being an actress, to be or not to be, I was really in the mood up there. It was fun. You see, all of this came from Sylvia's prowess, her courage. She really championed our program. And she could face obstacles and difficulties during that year with not the slightest hesitation. She was very much a fighter, a cause person. And she pioneered that program and left a legacy for the shows to follow that was really quite remarkable. Here we go. But it was not all fun and games. Not for me. About halfway through the year, I began to feel the dark side of Germany in those awful days of the war. Ragtag remnants of the German people, visibly suffering under the victor and vanquished regime. I began to wonder how and where these people were living, how they managed to survive from day to day. Their plight was so obvious. For instance, when we went to get our PX rations once a month, toothpaste, cigarettes, those things, the Germans would greet us like this when we came out, begging. If you threw a cigarette butt out the window, everybody smoked in those days, the children would fall on it like animals. They had nothing. Little people huddled in rubble near a piece of a store maybe that would remain, and staring at this big soldier show, going through their town with "We've been on soldier show" on our semi. It was quite a contrast that it began to get to me. For me, it was no longer just the light-hearted, spirit and happy bunch of Americans making merry in their theaters, their opera houses, taking anything we want from them. Well, I was distressed by war and the ravages it caused people. Those haunting faces we saw of the German people walking the streets and staring at our caravan. It was a change in my whole experience over there, and I began to be a little less comfortable. The madness of war. How could this happen? The wretchedness, the abject damage and poverty of those people. I don't know whether I discussed this with anybody else, but it made a visible, serious impression on my experience there. Let me share one experience how I think was connecting the rest of my life. I don't know how this happened. Sometimes when we were not performing, we took trips to sightsee in places. But one time I was in a cathedral, all by myself, and it was partially destroyed. And I had never been in a cathedral before. And I looked around, and I sensed something beautiful and wonderful. It's gorgeous to look at. But I said to myself, as I recall, there's something more. There's something better than war. I think that's as far as it took. But I went out and thought nothing of it until I got home. So 30 years later, fast forward, I was kind of in a war zone of my own. I had 4 children, lived in Palo Alto, and my husband had become an alcoholic, and we were divorcing. I was just so distressed. I couldn't really handle it. It was the nadir of my life. Well, now get this. A couple of months before, I had walked down California Avenue, past our reading room, and took a Sentinel from the free box out front. I went home, and I think I put it someplace. I never looked at it for a long while. And one morning, I was sitting in my house, the kids in school, and I really, guys, I felt like there was an end to my rope. I couldn't go on with the heartbreak of my family situation. So I went and got that Sentinel. And I opened it up, it was when they were little, 5 by 7, to a German testimony. That's what I remember. And so I was instantly healed of despair. I got it. There is something more. There's healing, there's God, there's man and his child. It all came flooding in me, and I was released instantly of my really misery. And I was filled with hope. We can make it. And that euphoria, that beautiful feeling of spiritual touch remained with me for a long time. I went out and got Science and Health, started attending this church, and for a year I studied the book, and I've never turned back. That was a connection I know started in Germany many, many years ago. Mary Baker Eddy writes, God's plan for us reaches the farthest bound across time and place. It's the chain of unbroken love that transforms. It hit me in the cathedral, and I know it traveled with me back home and was with me that morning when I was in need. I was so grateful, and I went on to enjoy this church, and I can't tell you how much it's meant to me, especially in my recent challenge. And just love you all, and I'm so grateful for my experience of it finding me, really, in my desperate hour. So, love you all. Thank you for letting me tell my story.
of Science at the same?
Anybody have